Hello, BookTube. It's Friday, and that means Friday Reads. It's a venerable BookTube tradition where everybody talks about the books they've just been reading, the books they're currently reading, the books that are on their docket to read right away. It's a little bit more complicated when I try to do it because that list for me is always changing and is much bigger than would fit in a video. Just today, I opened 2 mail packages on camera, both of which I intend to read today. So it changes. My Friday reads can change its topography in an instant. But I have 5 or 6 books here that I want to show you that are on my upcoming list, regardless of what else I get. Because in addition to books in the mail, I'm also adding to my TBR, my immediate TBR, my Friday reads style TBR, half the stuff that I find used at charity shops or the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. I'm adding at least half the stuff there for rereads. So it's a fluid thing, but I wanted to show you some books just to put them on your radar in case they interest you, because they're on my radar and they interest me. We'll start with a couple of romances. One is they're both by names that I know, but one much better than I know the other. The first is Lenora Bell. I've read, I think, one other novel by Lenora Bell. This, I believe, is the first book in a series. It's called Love is a Rogue. And it's the first book in the Wallflowers versus Rogues series, which takes as its premise that there is a society of dedicated wallflowers in the Regency period who don't want anything to do with marriage. They don't want anything to do with men. They have other plans, and they are working in consolidation to further those ends. And, of course, every single one of those plans is going to be disrupted by a rogue of some kind or other who stumbles into these ladies' lives and acquaints them with all that they're missing. And I've read many, many Regency novels like this where the young woman is a budding astronomer or a dedicated writer or a dedicated naturalist and doesn't want to fall in love because they believe that will be an end to their independent endeavors. And you can chart the course of such Regencies over the last 50 years, because 50 years ago, it was the end of their endeavors. They married and realized that they had been wrong and that they wanted to be married women, heads of household, mothers, grandmothers, much more than they wanted all that eggheady stuff. And you can watch that propensity change over the ensuing decades, so that now I'm sure that in the Wallflowers versus Rogues series, none of these women is going to give up her independent intellectual endeavors, no matter how head over heels or other body parts she falls with the rogue in question. I'm sure that is the case. And that's a much better way to conceive of these things. So I hope I'm right about that when it comes to this book. These kinds of Regencies always give me a little bit of pause. Because I know that I'm betraying the gays when I say this, but I actually just want them to get out of the way so that I can look at those books. Whenever there's a library on the cover of Regency Romance, I just want to look at the books, and there's always some heaving pect in the way. But the other romance that I'm going to be reading right away this weekend or soon after is by an author that I know very, very well, and this is the great Eloisa James. This is My Last Duchess. No reference there to Robert Browning. This is instead something that is pure fan service. It's purely the result of her just pleasing her fans, because this is the story of the parents of the Wilde siblings, the Wilde brothers, the extended Wilde family in love and lust, falling in and out of adventures, has been a hit for Eloisa James. And this book tells the story of their parents. So it's the sort of thing, when you're this invested in a series, you already know you're going to love it. I mean, Eloisa James can do no wrong. Unless she farms a book out to somebody who writes it entirely, I'm going to love it. But getting the backstory on Lord and Lady Wilde will be fantastic. This next one is something we've seen on this channel before in an advanced copy. I don't think the advanced copy had cover art. This, I think, is the cover art for the American release. It's from Oxford University Press. It's by Peter Stothard. And it's The Last Assassin, The Hunt for the Killers of Julius Caesar. Now, I'm once again dealing with glare here, so you might not be able to make out these covers very well. But that's the cover that I could find. I have not been sent a finished copy of this book. I very well may not be. And I dipped a toe into it. I read the first chapter. Just because the description that we saw when we hauled it in the mail led me to believe that this is all the trappings of a publicity team. That the book really is a monograph about just one of the assassins of Julius Caesar, one who isn't well known, and whose life story Stothard researched to a fine degrees. Somebody, you know, where you couldn't possibly write a biography of this person outside of the Journal of Roman Studies. You certainly couldn't write a biography of this person and expect it to sell to a general audience unless you change it just a bit to say that it's a hunt for all the assassins. So we will see. The initial toe that I dipped in this gave me the impression that not much has been done to dress up the book itself. That the book itself is mostly just a biography of one assassin. But we'll see. I'm interested in it either way, and it's coming up, so I need to get to it right away. And this next one is another work of nonfiction, a little bit amorphous. We'll see what the author can do with it. The author, of course, is the key factor with this book because, as I've mentioned many times on this channel, authors can build up an escrow of goodwill with me. If I read a book by an author and it's superb, I'm going to be eager to read the next book. And if the next book is superb as well, I'm going to have a lot more, incrementally more trust in that author not to do wrong. That's a fantastic feeling, and it's wonderful that so many authors inspire that. And this is one of those authors. You'll know, some of you will know this author. This is Daniel Jurgen, the author of The Prize. And this is the new map where he looks at all the things coming up in the 21st century that are going to redraw how we estimate everything. The implication of the premise, I think, being that the map had been drawn before in terms of territory, standing armies, rivers, defensible fortifications, that sort of thing, but that the new map will be very different. That it'll have to do with the cyber world and potable water and the change in climate, the change in not just those rivers, but in habitability. I'll be very interested to see that. This author is very good, very, very good at that kind of thinking. That kind of, the stereotypical thing would be out-of-the-box thinking. And I'm always willing to go where he leads. If he convinces me, fine. If he doesn't, I'll still learn a lot. So I'm not sure that this will be all the most optimistic thing in the world. I can't help but notice, though, that the cover looks much better, doesn't it? With the adjustable lighting here, which makes me feel like I'm duty-bound to show you this as the cover really was, instead of eaten away. See? These are the covers. The Last Assassin. Then we have the new map. We'll see. This author, I'm willing to follow him anywhere and give him a considerable benefit of the doubt. This next author also has a bit of an escrow account of goodwill. It's a bit of a slog. Any reservation that I'm showing on is a result of the subject, not the author. The author does a fine job. This is an English language translation of Volker Ulrich's biography of Adolf Hitler. This is volume 2, Downfall, 1939 to 1945. This is the British cover, which is more somber. It doesn't have the neon yellow of the American cover, but I'm going to have an ebook anyway, so it doesn't matter. And this is the huge second concluding volume of his 2-volume biography of Adolf Hitler, which follows almost down to the last month the exact same 2-volume chronological split that Ian Kershaw used for this same figure. And I'm interested, of course, in Hitler. I'm of course interested in this subject and in you know, all the history around it. Of course, if there's a major new Hitler biography, I'm going to read it, is the point I'm trying to make. It's very, very wearing, particularly in light of 21st century America. In light of 21st century America, where you have a figure who lost the popular vote in the Oval Office telling reporters that what he really wants is for his people to sit up and obey him the way the people of North Korea obey their dictator, and who has ordered his apparatchik at the head of the post office to physically remove post office boxes, mail boxes, from cities and states where the voting majority might go against him in the upcoming elections. Pure authoritarian move. Just a purely Nazi move. So this is a little bit more wearing than usual. There's enormous, those of you who don't live in America or don't watch the news, there's enormous ideological and political division in this country, never more so. It's never been worse, except for when we actually went to war with each other. And both sides accuse the other of manufacturing all sorts of stories, manufacturing fear-mongering narratives or whatnot. It's not possible for a sane person to argue that mailboxes are not being removed when there are hundreds of pictures of them being physically rooted out of the concrete and stored in the back of trucks, so that the people in that neighborhood cannot mail in a ballot. They cannot use the mail. There are post offices, but those are being shuttered too, and there's also delays in the post. This is all straight out of a handbook. Hitler followed that handbook, so it's a little bit more grating and wearing to read a book like this when you're living in a country where that is happening, where that is currently happening. Ulrich is a dry writer. Kershaw was not. Either way, I mean, I will read this. I've read the advanced copy that I have already. I will read this finished copy with extra detail, finger poised to take all sorts of notes, and I'll write about it. But I don't know that anyone's listening, but I would strongly advocate that from now on, let's say that if we're going to do big fat Hitler biographies, they stay in one volume. Let's just do one volume. This story is well known. Ulrich, as far as I've been able to tell from reading, I read the advanced copy. I read the advanced copy with no pencil in hand, didn't check any notes, didn't check any bibliographies or anything, just read it as a reading experience. But even reading it as a reading experience, I didn't detect a single thing that this author brings to the table that wasn't in, for instance, Ian Kershaw's 2-volume or any of the big 1-volume biographies. So I'm sure that I'm not sure that this kind of exhaustive detail is necessary, but I will be reading it with an eye towards annotation, and the annotation will be so much easier because I'll be reading an ebook. It'll be so much easier. I'll be able to just leave hordes and hordes of notes, long notes that I type, one-handed typing, without worrying about running out of room the way I would in a margin, and without worrying that I'm going to need to hunt for it the way I would with notes in a margin, because I'll just email it to myself. It's going to be I don't know what my critical brethren are complaining about on Twitter when they complain about having to use ebooks because of the pandemic. It's never been easier. But one way or another, once I'm done with a gigantic 1,000-page volume 2 biography of Hitler, I'm going to want a break, and this next author will give me one. This next author is perfect at giving breaks. This is the great Ellen Hildebrandt. This is Troubles in Paradise, the 3rd book in her Paradise series. I've read everything this author's ever written. I think she's utterly fantastic. Predictable, but in just the way that you want. Just the way that you want an author to be predictable. It's a little bit melancholy, though. This author, along with Mary Kay Andrews and a couple of other people, is a queen of the summer book. The book that looks summery and that comes out at just the right time so that you can buy it at the Vineyard Grapes and stick it in your tote bag and bring it to the beach and read, either on the beach on a towel or read in your backyard in your Adirondack chair with the sound of the waves just past the shrubbery. And that's a little melancholy for a couple of reasons. Not only because that vision largely didn't happen this year or was overshadowed with a lot of worry because of the pandemic, but also because no matter what it might feel like right now, summer is coming to an end in North America. We're in the middle of August. In the middle of September, no one will say that it's summer still. That's a little bit melancholy, but I can't wait. Can't wait to read it. I read all the others in this series. So, and then we have literary fiction, an author who is also involved in the book world, in the book critic world, and who's really good. His last book was about motherhood and pregnancy, was tremendously good. I really enjoyed it. This is the Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam, and is the story of a couple who decide to get away from it all by Airbnb-ing, sort of renting a posh house at the very tip of Long Island, far away from anybody that they know, very nice place, very much nicer than their own home, where they're going to connect with each other and with solitude and with reading and with their children. And they have barely ensconced themselves in this house when there's a panic knock at the door, and the people who have come to the house are the people who own it and who are renting it from them. An older couple who are very dissimilar from the family at the heart of the book. And they come to the house panicking with stories about how there's been some sort of mysterious blackout, that a large part of New York is affected, maybe beyond New York. And circumstances force all of them to hunker down together at the house. And that this author is really, really good at just that, at the sort of prickly dealings that people can have with each other when they're not sure where they stand with each other. That was just a small part of his last novel. It sounds like it's going to be the whole part of this novel. Can't wait. Hope it doesn't disappoint. Then this next one I had brought to my attention by Hannah at Hannah's Books, and no sooner had I clicked off her email than I got an email from the publicist. So I will be reading another translation of Virgil's Aeneid. I showed you one the other day, a printed copy the other day of a Virgil's Aeneid that was done with rhyme, with end rhyme. Almost unheard of. And here's another one. This is by Shady Barch. Another translation of the Aeneid. They're coming out at the same time. Roughly the same time. And who knows what this one will be like. I'm perfectly willing to revisit the Aeneid as many times as people have translations of it. I'm perfectly happy to do that. The fact there are 2 in 1 year, extra interesting. And also inevitably I will be reading them almost back to back. So I'll have the metrical and the translation choices of the one translator in my mind when I'm looking at the others. That's always wonderful. The only thing I worry about with this book, I worry about mainly for its author. This had to be a huge amount of work. Same thing with the other, the end rhyme Aeneid. And yet, if these get reviewed, they're almost certainly going to get reviewed together. Because every book critic or book section editor in the country is going to get both of them at the same time. And think, well, I want to review one of these, but it's, why not get twice the bang for my buck and review both of them? So that might not always be a bad thing. It'd be a bad thing if I had to do it at 800 words, but it might not be a bad thing if, for instance, somebody had to do it at 3,500 words for the New York Review of Books. That might work. Let's hope that it does. This next one is science fiction, and it is one of the only holdovers this Friday Reads from Last Friday Reads. Last Friday Reads had a theme running through it of I ought to know better, of I really ought to know better, where there were a whole bunch of books on that Friday Reads that I was sure were going to irritate me. And this is one of the only ones from this list that might be like that, because this writing combo has never pleased me. They keep coming out with books, and the books are about old friends, so I have to keep reading them. But this is the next book by Brian Herbert and Kevin Anderson. In their Dune series, their series of Dune knockoff novels, Dune Pastiche novels, where they are writing long novels about every single thing that's ever been mentioned by name in Frank Herbert's real, original Dune novels. And this is the first book in a series about Duke Leto of Caladan, the father of Muad'Dib, the father of the hero in Frank Herbert's Dune. This is going to be a trilogy about him living on the water planet, the forested planet of Caladan, before they move to Dune. I'm assuming that this trilogy will end with Duke Leto packing up his bags with his family and moving to Arrakis. But until then, this is what we'll get. We'll get his politicking on Caladan. We'll get his feuding with the House Harkonnen. We'll get his love of his Bene Gesserit consort, Lady Jessica, who he refuses to make his wife. We'll make it the birth of Paul Atreides. There'll be Gurney Halleck, there'll be Duncan Idaho, there'll be Thufir Hawat. These are all names that I know very well. If a totally unrecognizable teenage fan fiction person were to write a novel about these people, I would read it. For Frank Herbert's literary executor and son to write a novel, I'm certainly going to read it. But I have found their approach to writing so ham-handed and expository compared to Frank Herbert that sometimes they've been almost painful to read. Some of the later books that they've done have been almost painful to read. But I can't not, so I'm going to give it a try. And then the last book that we'll do for this time around is an exploration of the internet. And I always find that fascinating. This is by Talia Lavin, and it's Cultural Warriors, in which the author explores the world of online white supremacy. I'm assuming premising her book on the very true assumption that online white supremacy, online is where white supremacy has largely gone in order to live. And it is everywhere. Used to be 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that you could find it in little unknown chat rooms or on the darkest corners of 4chan. Now it is everywhere. Everywhere. Sites don't do a job of shutting it down. They don't go after it. And that's partially understandable, right? Since the President of the United States is a white supremacist who has praised these people in public. So if you're the proprietor of a message board website or a tech website or whatever, and you start to notice, oh, geez, we have a lot of white supremacists here, what are you going to do? Your moral path is still every bit as clear, but it's a little muddied if you watch the news. So I'll be interested to see what this author uncovers, where she goes, what common strands, commonalities, terminology, that sort of thing, and also predictions if she has any. I'm always interested in stuff like this. So there you have it. That is a Friday Reads. Just a Friday Reads of a variety of books that I will be reading very, very soon, either today or this weekend or next week. And I'm hoping that, as always with Friday Reads, that you will drop a line, let me know what you're reading, what you're doing. Also, let me know if any of these strike you as interesting. That's always interesting to me as well. But one way or another, I'm going to wrap this up, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.